Hi, my name is Tori King and welcome to Tori Talks. I am currently a senior in high school and have had muscular dystrophy since birth, which causes me to use a wheelchair full-time. In order to raise awareness about the disabled community, I created this podcast to bring in guests from different areas of the community to have them discuss the issues they feel affect their specific disability, as well as the community as a whole. For a copy of the complete transcript to this episode, please look in the description box. Today, I'm speaking with Marly Saade, who works at the Center for Disability Empowerment and uses a wheelchair full-time. Can you introduce yourself, tell me about yourself?
Alrighty, so my name is Marly Saade. I'm actually Lebanese. That's where I was born, in Lebanon. And my family moved around quite a bit. So about the time I was 3 years old, we moved to Canada. So I'm also a Canadian citizen. We lived there for about 5 or 6 years, and about 8. Just before I turned 8 years old, we moved back to Lebanon. And then when I was 13 years old, we moved to the U.S. and we've been settled in the U.S. ever since. The year after I graduated, I had just turned about 20 years old, and I had a traumatic car accident where I had a spinal cord injury. So I'm a T10, T12, so I have a little bit of function in my legs. And when I first got injured, I wasn't actually a U.S. citizen at the time, so I didn't qualify for any supports or services, any government assistance, not even Medicaid at the time. So when I actually left the hospital, I was about like $500,000 in debt because of the injury. So it was a pretty fun time. That was in 2007. I got my United States citizenship in 2010, and that's when I was able to get on benefits and get on Medicaid. And as soon as I became a U.S. citizen, I started working with OOD and got back into school just at Tri-C. I was in Cleveland at the time. So it was just like a small community college. And a couple of years in, I decided I was done with Tri-C and wanted to go somewhere else because I didn't feel like I was going anywhere. I was taking classes, but I wasn't getting anywhere. So I landed on a major, landed on a university, and came to Ohio State University in about 2013, 2012, right around that time. I spent about 3.5, 4 years here at OSU and then graduated. And then I got a job at a telecommunication agency because I couldn't find a job within my field of interest. And when I was working at that agency, I decided to start looking for other work as well. So I randomly started hitting different nonprofit agencies within Columbus community. I managed to get connected with Sue and the Center for Disability Empowerment. I think it was in 2017, right around 2017, 2018. And I've been with the agency ever since, kind of climbing the ladder, I guess, as you would say.
So you said that you started working at the telecommunications agency because you couldn't find something in your field of interest. What is your field of interest?
So I actually went to Ohio State University and got a bachelor's in Modern Standard Arabic with a minor in women's gender and sexuality studies. The goal was to be a translator, translate documentation, translate articles, translate pop culture, anything that I can get my hands on. To translate, I would have been happy to do. A lot of the jobs that I was finding were very military-based positions, and you had to travel abroad, and very politically charged positions. And though it makes sense, that's not necessarily what I wanted to do.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, I would have been happy translating books from English to Arabic or Arabic to English, and yeah, that would have been cool. I didn't want to get in the middle of politics. As a woman with a disability, it would have been a very charged environment, and it's very interesting because Lebanon was colonized. So for a very long time, the culture in the Middle East was told that it's not good enough, your language isn't cool enough. That's when English and Spanish started becoming part of the curriculum and the systems in the schools. Eventually, the people in that field used to be non-Arab scholars. It is now Arab scholars, but then I had to fight for my right to exist as an Arab scholar because they can tell just from the accent I use when I speak Arabic, my phrases, They know, even if I never say anything, they can tell that I'm not just a Lebanese woman. So I would have been looked at as other, and it would have been a highly charged environment for me to try to fight through, on top of having a disability, which, I mean, we both know you're barely seen as a professional, let alone as an expert in your field. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to pick one battle and stick with it. And for me, I felt like the battle for disability rights was more important. Yeah.
That's interesting that you talk about like trying to fight for your way at the table as a woman with a disability, because I feel like that's like literally anything you do. I feel like I could tell someone the sky is blue and they're like, "Are you sure it really is?"
Yeah.
You're just looking at it with wrong eyes.
Yeah. You're always constantly being told your point of view or your perspective is skewed somehow.
Or you're asking too much.
Yes, that one is a hard one to deal with, because like when you say things like, well, people with disabilities deal with this, people with disabilities deal with that, but then the general public's response to that is it's hard out there for everyone. Yes, I'm sure it is hard out there for everyone, but there are varying degrees of hardship that people go through, and that's what we're talking about here.
I feel like we see that with like the pandemic so much, because people are like, well, there's not that many people are dying. Yeah, it's all the disabled people.
Yeah. It's really interesting that even within our own community, I had people coming up to me and saying, you know, that the only people who are dying are people with pre-existing conditions. And my only response to that was, you mean people like you and me? Like, who are we talking about? We are the people who have pre-existing conditions. I'm pretty sure I could have lived another 20, 30 years pre-COVID. So let's not go there.
What was your life like growing up? And how did that change after you became like disabled?
So growing up, I had a pretty interesting childhood. I would call my father as an absentee father for quite a long time. Before we moved from country to country, he would move ahead of time. So there was a period when we were back in Lebanon, only living with our mom, and our dad was here in the US, kind of getting set up. That was hard, not having our dad around all the time. And we also have a mother who was undiagnosed schizophrenic for pretty much our entire childhood until we were in our like mid-teens at that point. So it was a pretty hectic environment, pretty abusive. I have two brothers, and I'm the middle one. I have an older brother who's a year, a month, and a day older than I am. That's always fun to say. And then I have a younger brother who's about 5 years younger than me, and he was the baby. So we all babied him and took care of him and pretty much raised him, because at about the time my older brother and I turned 12 or 11, our mom's health was pretty volatile. So we both kind of stepped up and took care of him and continued to take care of him as we got older. So it was pretty hectic, pretty unstable environment. And then in 2019, my parents got divorced. And my mom has family in Canada who still lived in Canada. So when the parents got divorced, my mom moved to live with them, which was actually a really good decision because healthcare in Canada is a little bit more accessible in a lot of ways. We are estranged, but I am told that she is doing better and is healthier. And it's one of those scenarios where like she was in control, she wasn't in control. We're children, we're now adults. We need to kind of move past that little the trauma, but we're still in the process. It was a challenge with living in a Lebanese mentality, with a Lebanese mentality. The culture is very much still kind of 50 years behind the times. There's still segregation. There's still institutionalized when anyone who has a child who ends up born with a disability or acquires one as they get older, the stigma is still pretty strong. They're still hidden from society. It's not necessarily talked about in culture. It's not, you don't really talk about it, essentially. I told my executive director, I don't know if I've ever met a Lebanese person who has Down syndrome. I believe I've ever met anyone in the Middle East who has Down syndrome. I'm not saying they don't exist. sure they do. I have just never had the privilege to meet a Lebanese individual. And you could say the same about any other disability, not just that. There's one person who uses a wheelchair in my village, and the very first time I ever met him, it was a very awkward encounter. Yes, because I mean, he's 10 years into his spinal cord injury, and you could see the pain is visible on his face and his mannerisms, whereas here I am about 5 years into my disability. Yes, it stinks. Yes, there's barriers, but I'm smiling and I'm being goofy and silly. And the interaction was just so weird to me because I'm like, why are you crying for me? You should know it's not that big of a deal. But at the same time, I have to remember, when I met him, he lives in Lebanon. He's in the village. Completely different environment than being in the US, where there is more accessibility then, and there's more inclusion. Even though we still have a long way to go, you and I can find each other and we can commiserate.
So you talk about the Lebanese mindset. How did that affect your relationship with the disabled community?
My dad, he comes from a large family of about 7 kiddos, so there was 8 of them almost. And his eldest brother was about 23, 24 years old. His name was Michael. He passed away from a car accident. When things happened, yes, it was very traumatizing for the family, absolutely, but they worked through it together. When my accident happened, my aunt went into the hospital. Within 2 weeks, she managed to lose like almost 10 kilos, which is about 15, 20 pounds, and was dehydrated. She put herself in the hospital. She was so ill. And my uncle had to have a conversation with her and was like, what's going on with you? Like, why are you reacting this way? You didn't react this badly when your own brother passed away. And her response was, my brother passed away and I miss him and I love him, but I don't have to look at him every day. I don't have to see the trauma of the accident every day. I don't have to mourn, like she can mourn the loss of him and the loss of the potential family that he could have had, but she is mourning everything I'm never going to have anymore. Relationships, families, potential work, employment, happiness, the ability to just go to the bathroom without having major issues or complications, or having to process your environment in order to execute and strategize accordingly. So yeah, it was hard. Because of that, I had this, okay, I'm only incomplete. I should be able to fully recover. There has to be a way for me to push myself to fully recover. And while I was at Tri-C, I spent a lot of that time at school, but also doing physical therapy at home on my own time. No matter what, as much as I would regain certain movements, it never amounted to enough that it could like change the lifestyle. I'm always going to need the durable medical equipment. It is what it is. So I had to change my mindset in order to be happy, which is to be healthy, efficiently strong is what I like to call it. I'm strong enough that I'm able to do all the transfers I need to do throughout the day, strong enough that I can get into the car and break down my wheelchair as many times as I need to throughout the day. And that to me is so much more freeing than constantly fighting for the ability to walk again. So it made me a happier person in the long run.
That makes a lot of sense. I had a spinal fusion when I was 9, and they told me after, so like I have muscular dystrophy. So because my muscles are weak, they're also really tight. So my hip flexors are really tight. So as I was like a child, I could walk for like 3 years. But to compensate for that, I arched my back and gave myself really, really, really bad scoliosis. So I had to have a spinal fusion to correct it. And my surgeon told me that like I probably would be able to walk again one day. Like it's not sustainable. I would be able to walk for like 6 steps. And also it doesn't really help me. I'm really short too. I'm 4'4". So like it wasn't even really making me reach anything. But like it's fine. I can do everything I need to do. I can drive. I can do whatever I can go wherever I need to go.
it's not the end of the world, is it? Not having the ability to walk is not the end of the world.
Yeah.
I think there are more important things that I would rather work on than regain the ability to walk at this point in my life. If I could. I mean, I can't say it like that because that gives it the implication that I have a choice in this matter, and I really don't. It is what it is. I had to move past it. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Like, someone asked me if I would rather like be taller or learn to walk, and I would always just be taller. I think it's much more convenient. Like, if I was a normal height, a lot of my problems would be gone. I'd be able to reach things. That's my main problem. I just can't reach anything right now. I have to climb on the counter to reach anything.
Do you have do you use a wheelchair, power wheelchair or manual?
I have a manual wheelchair, but I am able to walk with my hands on my knees. So like, I don't use my wheelchair in my house at all.
Oh, okay.
So like, I can get from point A to point B without a wheelchair. It's just not sustainable. So like, I don't, if I'm ever out. I can walk like 20 feet and then I need to stop. So that's good enough in my house, but
That makes sense. Yeah. That's pretty cool though, that you feel comfortable to do that, like go without the wheelchair at home.
yeah, I don't live in an accessible house. There's 3 steps to get into my house, and I live in a 2-story house. So like, when the pandemic like really hit and we were quarantined for months, I like brought my wheelchair inside because I wasn't going anywhere. It's just a lot more work to get it in and out of my house. But I mean, like, once I plan to go to college, obviously that'll be a different story because I'll live somewhere that is accessible. So I wondered, you talked about you were looking for nonprofit jobs. So you found the Center for Disability Empowerment. How did you know this is like the place you want to work?
I just was interested in helping people.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did the research and when my friend made the connection with Sue, it sort of just kind of happened quickly. I was first there to help launch the Empower Youth group, the peer group for youth with disabilities. And I was just a contract employee. I was a contractor, not an employee. Sorry. Then they had the youth transition coordinator at the time unexpectedly had to leave the agency, and Sue offered me the position. I said yes, I'd love to. So I did that for part-time, and I kept the telecommunication job part-time. And then as my hours built up with CDE, I stopped working at the telecommunication agency. I started off as the Empower Youth Group person, and then I did the Youth Transition Coordinator, and then I was the Personal Care Assistance Program Outreach person, and then I took over that program and I became the Personal Care Assistance Program Coordinator. Now I'm the PCA Supervisor, and we hired someone to take on my previous role. I've always wanted to do something that helped people. I didn't know what it was. I was never that person. I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life. I did not. When I was a child, I thought I wanted to be a brain surgeon so that I could help fix schizophrenia, thinking that that's how schizophrenia worked at the time. It's not. And then I was like, you know what? I want to be a family lawyer because I want to protect the children that aren't being protected in all these divorces. And then I don't even know what I thought I wanted. Oh yeah, that's right. I wanted to be an FBI agent for a minute. Part of the Arabic translation thing. And eventually I just wanted to do something with Arabic. I didn't necessarily care I wanted to do the translation is really what I wanted to do. Because it would have been a cool job to have. You're a contractor. You don't necessarily talk to a lot of people. You do the job, you get it done, you get paid. And then you find another job. It's kind of cool, I thought. But it's nice to have the stability of a 9-to-5 guaranteed 40 hours a week employment. I'm not mad at the position I have with CDE. I quite enjoy my job. I enjoy the people I work with. And I enjoy everything I'm learning from them.
What do you do on a daily basis?
So my role for the center is I'm the PCA program supervisor now, and I am also I run our database. So I help staff make sure that their case notes are done correctly and they're done on time. I also do the yearly federal report for the system. So because of the way that our funding is received, we receive federal funding. So we have to submit a report every year on the things that we've done. And I am also working on the COVID vaccine grant. My office was recently awarded. And I'm also getting my hand a little bit into some ADA stuff. I want to learn more about that and be a coordinator potentially, or help businesses become more ADA compliant and see the benefits in being a universally accessible for all people. I think that would be awesome. I'm not sure what it'll take, but it'll take a lot of finesse, I think. Cool-headedness, and hopefully giving them the facts. And honestly, everybody, like any business, it opens because it wants to make money, right? There is value in being accessible because you're not limiting yourself to one group of individuals. Absolutely anyone can benefit from your services. Your growth potential would be endless at that point.
Like the whole thing with with the pandemic and like curbside carry out, or like groceries where they'll bring it out to your car. Like that helps disabled community, or like the disabled community, so much. But it helps other people too. So like if only offered that before.
I've always used the example of the push button doors or the sensor doors. It's like everybody who's carrying bags in their hands or have things in their hands are going to have a hard time opening a public door, whether they're rolling or walking in. However, with those available, anybody and absolutely everybody could benefit from the push button door. Yes, it's a convenience thing for you and an accessibility for me, but it benefits all of us, just like smart technology. It's convenient for people to have Alexa present, to be able to turn the volume up on their TV, to help them see who's at the door and open the door. It's improving, it's giving people a chance at greater independence.
Like I always think there's a Subway in the town near me, and Subway doesn't normally have a drive-through, but this one does for some reason. And everyone thinks it's just very convenient, but I'm like, that's the only Subway I can go to because I can't go in the actual store.
Yeah.
I actually had to call, they closed just the drive-through one day, and I had to call them, and I was like, hey, I use a wheelchair. Can you please give me my food? Because I can't go inside.
Did they?
They did. They were like, yeah, pull up to the drive-through window, we'll give it to you. And I was like, thank you. Very cool.
That's an accommodation that I wish all businesses would provide, honestly. It would be nice to have that option. I don't know what it'll take to get them there, but it'll be nice.
I wondered, so what issues do you feel the disabled community faces that other people don't think about? Like, as we were talking about, there's so many little accommodations that people just don't think about that we need.
There's a lot, honestly. Like, I mean, you have to strategize every time you leave the house, right? It's all a process, and it's hard to honestly articulate even sometimes. All the things that you need to have on hand just to be able to have an overnight visit with your friends, or how uncomfortable it might get if something happens in the middle of that overnight visit, but you don't necessarily want to say anything because you don't want to make yourself be in an uncomfortable scenario. This one really bothers me. There's a lot of times where people will equate the paralysis similarly to a child, and that is becoming a major pet peeve of mine because I'm not a child. I would rather you compare me to the older woman on the crutches and walker over there than a baby, because we're not the same level. It's not the same situation.
No.
Then there's like washing the dishes and having the space to pull in, having the sinks not so high that all the water will drip down here, being able to reach the faucet if it's a little tiny handle, and navigating it up and down or left and right when it's hot versus cold water. And then things that get thrown into the sink, if it's deep enough, I don't see it. It could sit there and I would never know it was back there. So there's just small things that it's hard to really articulate and put in words unless you're living it in the moment.
That makes sense. Like you talked about things getting thrown in like the top of the sink. I always think that with laundry. So like my family now has front loading washers and dryers because if not, I can't do laundry. I can't reach down far enough to get the laundry. Um, like as I've been going on college visits, I always have to look at their laundry facilities to see if they own like how their laundry is because a lot of them do stacked washer and dryers. So
Yep.
like I would be able to wash my clothes but not dry them because I
Hmm.
wouldn't be able to reach the dryer, or they have them where they're down, where you like throw them down, and I can't do that because I can't reach my clothes out.
What about taking the trash out? Have you explored what that process is going to look like?
No, I don't want to think about that. The trash bag is
That
like
was
as big as me. That's not gonna be fun.
my quick fix was to buy a dolly.
That makes sense.
That was my quick fix. Now, as you get older, there are some apartment buildings that provide car concierge service like that. This is cool. This I can get behind.
Yeah.
And then I'm very touchy when it comes to the parking lot and the weather, snow and ice, and yeah, those are interesting, hard to navigate. So clearing your car from ice and snow.
Yep, I have to plan so much time in my morning to do that. Or my favorite is when people don't clear the curb cuts at my school. So you know the winter storm that happened a week ago, right?
Yeah.
Um, the school or my school cleared our parking lot and our sidewalk, which is so nice, right? And they put all of the extra snow on the curb cut. So it was like a 6 foot tall pile of just snow on the curb cut, which was so fun. I had to have one of my friends pick my wheelchair up and put it onto the curb for me and then help me get over this icy patch, which is so
Oh,
fun because I have horrible balance. And we had to do that every day this entire week. Yeah. It's just like so many little things like that that people don't think about.
yeah, yeah. It's I used to have I love her dearly for this, but it was counterproductive in the end. I had a friend who absolutely did not mind helping me get in and out of the car, helping me navigate like grassy terrains or hilly scenarios.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I wish she would just, instead of going to an inaccessible park and having me battle my way through it, why not just find an accessible park? I don't need to know that you're willing to help me. I need to know that you're willing to recognize my accessibility needs.
Exactly.
And I mean, I love you dearly for being the friend that's always willing to be there for me, but at the same time, I need you to back off. I need you to back off of me when it comes to scenarios that I don't want to be put into, such as going to a park that's not accessible. I don't want to go. I don't want you to help me. It's not happening. Now, if you want to go to an accessible park, I'm happy to go.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to the other ones.
Like when I go out with my friends, I want to be able to just like think about hanging out with them. I don't want to have to think about the 10 steps that I need to think about just to go somewhere.
I wish that there was an easy way to explain it to them without hurting their feelings too, because you can't always articulate these kinds of things to people without them taking it personally.
For sure.
And then you kind of look like the bad guy for saying it's not about you, and you can't think about it that way. It's not about you, it's about me. And you don't want to be put in that scenario where people are looking at you, and then why, when we could just go anywhere that will just let me roll through the door and no one will worry about me and my existence and my presence.
And you don't have to figure out the extra like steps just to get you somewhere.
Yes, that would be nice too, very much so.
Due to technical difficulties, I lost the rest of the footage, so this is all we have on Tori Talks today. I would like to thank Marly so much for talking to me, as well as the Center for Disability Empowerment for their help in allowing me to network within the disabled community.